Friday afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another video. And happy September. So this afternoon I'm finally going to bring you all 24 movies I watched in August. To be concise on the physical media I'm going to show off, yeah. So I started my MCU journey again. So I did watch the first 12, and you'll see that in this video. I started my horror project, and also there were some new releases on this list. So surprisingly, August was a pretty productive month for me. And before I get started, because I got a lot to go through, I want to share with y'all my brief announcement that goes out through September. I'm going to revisit the Saw franchise leading up to Saw X at the end of the month. So I'll also do my MCU project, my horror project, that, and I might even do like an Expendables run through leading up to Expendables 4. Gonna be a busy month. So just wanted to throw that out, and let's go ahead and get started with the first movie I watched, and that was Iron Man. And this is the stepping stone that officially began the MCU. This came out 2 months before The Dark Knight, and this is one of the best origin stories in Marvel, in my opinion, in the MCU. This is a very grounded story that tells a story of Tony Stark, and he's a billionaire playboy and philanthropist, and he is captured by Afghani rebels, and he tries to get out of that situation by building himself a suit made of iron. He does get out, but he comes out with more tech, and he becomes Iron Man himself. And his villain is Ironmonger, which is played by Jeff Bridges, and his name is Obadiah Stane. I've always really enjoyed this movie, but since the MCU started, we've got many movies like this. Well, especially like the villain motivations, but that was Iron Man. And before you question me, no, I did not do a singular review for any of these MCU movies, because we're talking 32 of these things, and I do not have the time to do that. So I'm just going to outright rank them when the Marvels drops in November. But I'm just going to watch the entire franchise and briefly describe the movie. There you go. The second movie I watched was The Meg. And this is a very decent shark movie. It's not the best, but it's a fun time if you're like in the mood for like a good shark movie. But this stars Jason Statham, and he's just underwater in this vessel throughout this whole movie, and he goes toe to toe with a megalodon, That was the Meg. And if you want my full thoughts, I did a video about the Meg and the Meg 2, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the next movie is The Incredible Hulk, and this also released in 2008. So to me, this is the first minor stumble in the MCU. In my opinion, every time I try to watch this, I get kind of bored and it's kind of forgettable. But this is kind of like the black sheep of the MCU. But Hulk is played by Edward Norton in here, and he just goes toe-to-toe with Abomination. That's all I can tell you. It's not the worst MCU movie, but it's near the bottom for me. The Incredible Hulk. Followed by Meg 2, The Trench. And every time I thought about this movie, the more I dislike it. This movie was very dumb and, even worse, boring. I mean, it's literally close to a 2-hour runtime if I'm not mistaken, and 90% of it has nothing to do with Jason Statham fighting a megalodon. They decide to incorporate illegal miners, there we go, and they're kind of like the central villain in this movie. I don't care about these human villains. I want Jason Statham to take out a megalodon. You get that in the last 15 minutes. So this one was very disappointing. And August was up and down for me, new release wise. I'll get into that later in this video, but continuing on, the next movie I watched, Iron Man 2, and this released in 2010, and this introduces the likes of War Machine, now played by Don Cheadle, and Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson, or Natasha Romanoff, I should say. And very unpopular opinion, I've always really enjoyed this movie, but it's going to go lower on my list because there are better movies out there. But the main villain in here is played by Mickey Rourke, and his name is Whiplash. Very cool design for this villain because he just has these lightning rod whips. But you also have Sam Rockwell as Justin Hammer. He was the most uninteresting villain in here. But this one, a step down from the original one, but it's still very watchable. Iron Man 2. Followed by the first movie in my horror project, It Follows. And I haven't watched this movie since theaters. I mean, it came out back in 2015. And at first, I thought this movie was like a headache. But after rewatching it, it's actually a very smart movie. So it's essentially like a supernatural slasher where an STD is the killer. And this girl has sex with her new boyfriend, and he passes the entity on to her to let the entity follow her. It's a weird premise, but this movie is smart and very cerebral in a way. And it's got a really kick-ass score. And not to mention one of the most memorable openings in horror movie history, where this girl is just like twisted on the beach. Full review if you want my full thoughts on the channel. Moving on, I have Thor, and this was released in 2011, and this is the origin story for Thor. So this introduces Thor, Loki, and even Hawkeye in a supporting role. And this just goes through like how tyrannical Thor really is. He just is better than everybody else. And Odin banishes him to Earth and takes away his power. But once the Destroyer is after him, he wields the power of Mjolnir, and with the help of Mjolnir, he takes down the Destroyer and Loki. And this one is also a very decent one, but Thor is kind of all over the place for me. This I consider my second favorite in the franchise, but Ragnarok is by far the best. And I'm going to get into the sequel later on, but this is still a pretty passable MCU movie. Thor. Followed by a movie I really wasn't intending on seeing, but I started hearing good things about it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. And this is a new animated movie that had the producers of Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. And this blends CGI with hand-drawn animation. And I gotta say, this is one of the coolest looking movies this year, compared to Across the Spider-Verse, of course. And this movie really understands the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as a whole, because they actually are teenagers in here. But a new threat comes about New York City in Superfly, who is voice acted by Ice Cube. Ice Cube is fantastic in here, and this was an overall great movie. And as a minor fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I had a blast with this one. So, full review on the channel, check it out. Next up is Captain America, the First Avenger, also released in 2011. This is the 5th film in Phase 1, and pretty much introduces the origins of Captain America. And you are also introduced to Bucky Barnes, which is his right-hand man. And the villain in here is Red Skull. Another passable MCU movie, but the Captain America trilogy gets better. I still like this one, but it's definitely lower on my list. but that was Captain America, the First Avenger. So, the next movie I watched was The Last Voyage of the Demeter, and this was a Dracula retelling that actually adapted a chapter from Bram Stoker's Dracula. And this had Dracula on a ship on his way to England. This was actually a very solid horror movie that kind of acts as like a gateway to horror. But a lot of people compared this to like Alien on a ship. So I definitely do see the comparisons, because you have like a crew of men up against this creature. And I definitely do like the way they handled Dracula's design, making him look more Nosferatu in a way. This is a very solid movie, and I have a review for it on the channel, so take a look-see. The next movie I watched was actually part of an advance screening. I saw this movie 2 weeks early before it even came out, so I guess I'm special. But anyway, that movie is Gran Turismo. And I gotta say, I really wanted a movie like this year, because this is loosely a video game adaptation, but a sports drama first. And this tells the story of Jan Martinborough. He is like a Welsh teen who has an obsession with the Gran Turismo games, and he dreams one day of becoming a professional race car driver. And Nissan comes up with this competition to actually get the best Gran Turismo players to race. This was a really, really good sports movie. And this is easily my favorite movie of the month. This is definitely going to be in my best of the year list. I really enjoyed this one. Full review on the channel. Moving on, I have the second movie in my horror project, and that is The Descent. This was released in 2005, and this tells the story of 6 women spelunking in the Appalachian Mountains. But the way this movie begins, it begins with tragedy, because our final girl loses her husband and daughter in a very horrific, gory car crash, because they go head on with like this truck, and it has like metal rods. You can guess where this is going. But her friends want to calm her down by surprising her with like a cave trip. But this cave trip is not relaxing whatsoever, because this cave was inhabited by cave-dwelling humanoids. I really enjoy this movie. It's creepy, and it's very claustrophobic. And most of this movie is, of course, filmed in the dark, which makes this movie even more terrifying, because you don't know what you're going to see, and it's just an overall great indie horror movie. That was The Descent. Next movie to end Phase 1, The Avengers. And this was released in 2012. And this unites Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye. And their villain is Loki. So Loki is after the Tesseract, which is like a mythical weapon to control the world. Sounds very generic, but I freaking love this movie. It's always been one of my favorite MCU movies. But once we get to 2018 and 2019, this movie is probably like my third favorite Avengers movie. And it's still a really good top 10 MCU movie. So it's just a overall great team up movie. And that was The Avengers. And that ends Phase 1. So naturally, I went right into Phase 2 with Iron Man 3. And this was released in 2013. And this picks up after the events of the Avengers. And Tony Stark is like struggling with like PTSD. And he always has like visions of him going up into the sky during the climax of the Avengers. And his suit is poisoning him even worse than Iron Man 2, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But you also meet the villain in here, the Mandarin. And I gotta tell you, the Mandarin twist is just dumb. Because, I mean, when I first saw it, I'm like thinking, what? But it turns out the main villain in here is Guy Pearce. And he absorbs heat and he becomes like indestructible. But Ben Kingsley, who played Trevor Slattery, gets a better arc in Shang-Chi. So talk about that more when I get to that. It's gonna be a while. But this movie, passable, but I don't want to say it's one of the weakest Iron Man movies, but that twist really divided audiences. But that was Iron Man 3. Followed by Thor: The Dark World. And woof, what a drop in quality. This is easily in my bottom 5. Because every time I watch it, I completely forget about it. Because I've either dozed off or it's just bland. And our villain in here is Malekith, which is the leader of the Dark Elves, and he just wants world domination, and he's after some thing. But you do get a team up with Thor and Loki in here. I do like that aspect. You get the return of Jane Foster. But this movie's a mess. in my opinion. And like I said, it is extremely boring. But that was Thor: The Dark World. I sounded pretty negative there, but my opinion. Followed by the next DC EU movie, or is it DCU movie? Blue Beetle. And this movie bombed even harder than The Flash, if I'm not mistaken. But this was actually a very decent surprise. I actually kind of prefer this to The Flash. Again, my opinion. But this movie stars Jolo Mardueñez of Cobra Kai fame. Never watched it, so I had no idea who this guy was. But this movie is just Latino based, and it's all about like family and fighting. The one thing that really makes this movie kind of generic and middle of the road is Susan Sarandon playing Victoria Cord. She was definitely the most bland villain that I've seen in a long time. But essentially, Jaime Reyes gets this blue scarab, and it's kind of like a parasite, and it just attaches to his host, and it becomes Blue Beetle. Which I did compare this to like Ant-Man, Iron Man, and even Spider-Man. It's good, but it's generic. And honestly, this is probably like this is my third favorite movie of the month. Yeah. But that was Blue Beetle. Followed by the third movie in my horror project, The Hills Have Eyes, 2006. And this was, of course, a remake that was based upon Wes Craven's movie that released in 1977. This tells the story of like a family trying to get to California, but they get stranded in the desert. But the least of their worries is trying to find help because they fight to survive and fend off cannibalistic mutants. I've always dug this movie. It's one of the best modern remakes in my opinion. And it's very creepy and very disturbing. So, full review if you want my thoughts. The Hills Have Eyes, 2006. I'm all back. Moving on to probably one of the worst movies I've watched this year, and probably one of the worst comedies I've watched in the last 5 years. That movie is Strays. And oh my god. This is a new raunchy dog comedy, and his owner is very abusive. There we go. So Will Forte, which is the owner, leaves Reggie, and Reggie fends for himself, but he meets 3 new strays: Bug, Maggie, and Hunter. Bug is voiced by Jamie Foxx. Maggie, Isla Fisher, and Hunter Randall Park. I really wanted to like this movie because I really do love dogs. I'm not a dog owner myself, but yeah. This movie is bottom of the barrel in its humor, and it felt like it was penned by 5-year-olds. So I really didn't enjoy this movie whatsoever. It was funny for like 20 minutes, but then it just got repetitive. But that was Strays. Full review if you want my thoughts. Because that was a fun video. Okay, I have 6 more movies to talk about. So let's knock them out. The next movie I watched was Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This was released in 2014, and 2014 marked one of the MCU's best years because everybody has this in high regard as one of their favorite MCU movies. But Captain America is back with Black Widow, and you also have the introduction of Falcon in here. The villain in here is the Winter Soldier, which is Bucky Barnes, which was, of course, Captain America's right-hand man during World War II. This was a very refreshing step up from the first one. This is an espionage spy thriller. Something very different for the MCU, and I really dug it. But you also have like a minor villain in here, played by Robert Redford, which is essentially a modern day Red Skull. But Robert Redford betrayed S.H.I.E.L.D. and he works for Hydra. So Cap has 2 villains to deal with in here, and it's an overall great action thriller. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Followed by Guardians of the Galaxy, also released in 2014. This was one of the biggest surprises MCU has ever come up with, because I had no idea who this team was, and I was just blown away on how great this movie really is. Easily a top 10 MCU movie, and the Guardians go up against Ronan the Accuser, and it's just a blast. That was Guardians of the Galaxy. And a couple months back, I actually talked about the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, so if you want my full thoughts on that, you can check that out as well. But moving on, the next movie I watched was the final movie for my horror project this month, Sinister. And I threw this on just to make sure that it makes my top 50. It does. This movie is very disturbing, and it makes you feel very uncomfortable, because it's about like this family who like moves into a new house. Turns out this house is like a crime scene that showed like a family being hung from a tree in a snuff film. this is how this movie begins, and Ethan Hawke is like a true crime writer, and he wants to create one of his best books ever. But he finds like all these snuff films that like had these families just get brutally murdered. This movie is horrifying and just disturbing. I thought The Hills Have Eyes was disturbing. This was way more disturbing. And the entity that is influencing all these children to commit patricide was Bagul, which is a Babylonian deity, and he's essentially like a child eater. So his influence comes across all these children, making them kill their families. That was Sinister. 3 more movies. And the final new release I saw in August was The Hill. And this was a new baseball biopic about Ricky Hill, which was a disabled kid that wore braces on his legs throughout childhood. And he was raised in like a very religious family. His dream was to become a baseball player. Major league, I should say. But his body functions were kind of weird throughout this movie because it showed him in the braces as a kid, but he got better as a teenager. But he made sure not to miss a tryout for the major leagues. He does get his wish because he played with the Montreal Expos in 75 to 79. He only played for 4 years because he essentially damaged his spine and he couldn't really do much after that. I really did enjoy this movie, but I do have a full review on the channel if you want my thoughts. That was the video before this video, so it's pretty recent. 2 more movies. And the next one is Avengers Age of Ultron. This was released in 2015, and this reunites all the Avengers, of course, with the addition of Vision, Scarlet Witch, and a very short appearance by Quicksilver. And the main baddie in here is Ultron, which is a weapon that Tony Stark created, and he's just a Titan AI on the loose. But Ultron is basically like one of the most powerful MCU villains towards the Avengers. Pre-Thanos, of course, because we know where that went. But the Avengers stop Ultron, but they come up with the realization that they destroyed Sokovia, which is a fictional European city or country, whatever. And this movie like leads into the events of Captain America Civil War. So this is the weakest Avengers movie, but it's kind of like in the middle for me. It's not bad. There's just Avengers movies like up here, and that's like down here. But that was Avengers Age of Ultron. And the final movie was AntMan. And this is the end of Phase 2. So this also released in 2015. And this tells the story of Scott Lang, which was a recently released convict from San Quentin. And he was known to be like in breaking and entering and petty crimes. So he is recruited by Hank Pym and Hope Van Dyne to try on the Ant-Man suit, which ranks him down to Ant-Man, of course. And the villain in here is Yellow Jacket, played by Corey Stoll, which his character arc gets like demolished in Quantumania. I'll get into that whenever I get to that. But this is actually a very solid origin movie for the MCU. But this does have aspects of Iron Man. But it's a pretty decent movie to cap off Phase 2. And I also have a video on the Ant-Man trilogy on my channel as well. So full thoughts in that video. And folks, that wraps up my 24 movies I watched in August. It was a very productive month, and I have a lot coming to the channel in September. I will continue my MCU run through, my horror project, Saw franchise review and ranking, and also an Expendables review and ranking. Plus we got The Nun 2, Haunting in Venice, and other movies in between. So, hope you guys enjoyed this otherwise long video. Apparently I do like to talk a lot. So, yeah. The next video I do want to film is my Gunslinger review. I'll try and have that out hopefully tonight or after I get back from Branson during the Labor Day weekend. But that's going to be my next video. And then after that, I'm going to do Equalizer 3. I'm going to go see that Tuesday, so look out for that review. And that's all I got for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios. Peace.